Emma Rodriguez had perfected the art of invisibility. In the bustling corner cafe where she worked as manager, she moved like a ghost through crowds, eyes downcast, shoulders curved inward. At 28, she had learned that blending into the background kept her safe from questions, from judgment. From the pitying looks that followed single mothers everywhere, the morning rush at Riverside Cafe was in full swing. Steam hissed from the espresso machine while customers shouted orders over the grinding of coffee beans. Emma worked mechanically, her hands steady as she prepared drinks, her face a carefully neutral mask. She had been doing this for 6 years, ever since her world had collapsed around her. Behind the counter, tucked in the small office, 4-year-old Sophie sat coloring at a tiny desk Emma had squeezed into the cramped space. The regular babysitter had called in sick, leaving Emma with no choice but to bring her daughter to work. It was against company policy, but Emma's boss had looked the other way this time. Sophie was the opposite of her mother in every way. Where Emma shrank from attention, Sophie beamed at everyone with an openness that both terrified and amazed her mother. The little girl had wild chestnut curls that refused to be tamed, enormous brown eyes that seemed to see straight into people's souls, and a laugh that sounded like bells chiming. The cafe door chimed at exactly 9:15. Emma didn't look up from the latte she was pouring, but she heard the shift in energy, the subtle hush that fell over the room. Someone important had entered. She could feel it in the way conversations dropped to whispers, in the rustle of people straightening in their seats. Jackson Hayes didn't frequent coffee shops. His assistant usually handled such mundane tasks, but this morning, after another sleepless night haunted by memories, he had dismissed his driver and walked the Chicago streets alone, ending up at this small cafe purely by chance. At 35, Jackson carried the weight of empire and loss in equal measure. His tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than most people earned in a month. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, premature aging from stress and grief. Behind expensive sunglasses, his blue eyes held a weariness that no amount of sleep could cure. He approached the counter, barely noticing the young woman who took his order without meeting his eyes. Black coffee, nothing fancy. He was about to turn away when a commotion erupted from behind the counter. Sophie had wandered out of the office, drawn by some instinct she couldn't name. The moment she saw Jackson, everything in her small world seemed to click into place. Without hesitation, without the shyness that usually gripped her around strangers, she ran straight toward him. Emma's heart stopped. She lunged forward, but she was too slow. Sophie had already reached Jackson, her tiny hands grabbing onto his silk tie with surprising strength. Her face tilted up with absolute trust and recognition. The cafe went silent. Everyone stared at the bizarre tableau. The billionaire CEO frozen in shock, the small child clinging to him like she had found something precious, the terrified mother rushing around the counter. But the strangest thing was that Jackson didn't pull away. He stood perfectly still, staring down at Sophie with an expression of stunned wonder. The little girl began humming a melody, soft and sweet. A lullaby with words that weren't quite right, but felt achingly familiar. Emma reached them, her face burning with embarrassment and fear. She tried to pry Sophie's fingers from the expensive tie, whispering frantic apologies. Sophie let go. Right now. "I'm so sorry, sir. She's never done anything like this before." But Sophie held on tighter, her humming growing louder. The melody pierced through Jackson like a blade made of memory and longing. It was the same song, the exact same variation that his son Oliver used to sing during his final weeks in the hospital. Where did she learn that song? Jackson's voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. Emma's hands trembled as she finally freed Sophie from his tie. "I taught her. It's just something I made up years ago. Please, I'm so sorry for the disruption." Jackson knelt down to Sophie's level, his expensive suit forgotten. Up close, he could see the innocence in her eyes, the pure joy radiating from her small face. She reached out and touched his cheek with one chubby hand. And for the first time in 3 years, Jackson felt something other than the hollow ache of loss. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Sophie Marie Rodriguez. I'm 4.5. She held up her fingers proudly. "You're sad, but it's okay." The sad goes away sometimes. The simple wisdom from a child's mouth cracked something open in Jackson's chest. Emma watched in disbelief as tears gathered in the eyes of this powerful stranger. She had no idea who he was, had never paid attention to business news or society pages. She only knew she needed to get Sophie away before they caused more of a scene. "Sophie, we need to go back to the office. This gentleman has to leave." Jackson stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Emma's face, really seeing her for the first time. There was something hauntingly familiar about her features, something that tugged at memories he couldn't quite grasp. His question surprised even himself. "Please, just 5 minutes." Emma's instinct was to refuse to retreat back into her safe isolation. But something in his face stopped her. She saw the same bone-deep exhaustion she felt every morning. The same haunted quality that came from carrying unbearable weight alone against every self-preservation instinct she possessed. Emma nodded. They sat at a corner table. Sophie perched on Jackson's lap as if she belonged there, still humming her lullaby. The cafe had returned to its normal rhythm, though curious glances still drifted their way. Jackson didn't know where to begin. How could he explain that this child's song was identical to the one his dying son had sung? That her spontaneous embrace had been the first human warmth he had felt since burying his family? "My son used to sing that exact song," he finally said. "Same melody, same made-up words. He died 3 years ago. Cancer." Emma's professional mask crumbled. Her hand flew to her mouth, genuine compassion flooding her features. "I'm so deeply sorry. I can't imagine that pain." He was 5. "We tried everything. Every treatment, every experimental drug. Nothing worked." Jackson's voice was flat, reciting facts to keep emotion at bay. The last month, he was in Chicago Memorial Hospital. Something cold slithered down Emma's spine. Chicago Memorial? Yes, the pediatric oncology ward. Emma's world tilted. 6 years ago, before Sophie, before her life had imploded, she had volunteered at that exact ward. She had spent countless hours reading to sick children, singing lullabies she invented to comfort them through painful treatments. What was his name? The question emerged as barely a whisper. Oliver. Oliver James Hayes. The name hit Emma like a physical blow. She remembered Oliver. Sweet, brave Oliver with the Spider-Man pajamas and the gap-toothed smile. The little boy who had loved her silly songs so much he had begged her to teach him every word. "I knew him," as the confession spilled out before she could stop it. "I was a volunteer there. I sang to the children. Oliver was one of my favorites. He had so much light in him." Jackson's carefully constructed walls shattered. This woman, this stranger who had materialized in a random cafe, had held his son's hand during the darkest time, had brought him comfort when Jackson himself had been falling apart, unable to be strong enough for his own child. "You were there?" His voice broke. "You helped him?" Emma nodded, tears streaming freely now. "I tried. I sang to him almost every night. He called me his music angel." The coincidence was impossible, astronomical. Yet here they sat, brought together by a 4-year-old child who had recognized something neither adult could see. A connection forged in grief and maintained by a lullaby that refused to be forgotten. Sophie, oblivious to the emotional storm around her, continued playing with Jackson's tie, content in a way Emma had rarely seen. The little girl who usually clung to her mother had found inexplicable comfort in this stranger's arms. Jackson looked at Emma with new eyes. "This can't be random. Sophie running to me, the song, you being Oliver's volunteer. It's too much to be coincidence." Emma wanted to argue, to retreat into logic and reason. But she had stopped believing in pure chance the day she discovered she was pregnant and the father had vanished like smoke. She had learned that life operated on patterns too complex for human understanding. "I don't know what it means," she admitted. But Sophie has never done this before. She's usually terrified of strangers. Maybe she recognizes something we can't see. Jackson stroked Sophie's hair absently, the gesture natural as breathing. "Maybe Oliver sent her to me, to remind me that life continues, that joy still exists." It should have sounded crazy. Instead, it felt like truth. 3 days passed before Emma heard from Jackson Hayes again. She had Googled him the night after their encounter, shocked to discover the quiet man who had held her daughter was one of Chicago's most powerful tech moguls. Hayes Technologies dominated the artificial intelligence sector, worth billions. His tragedy had been public wife and son killed when a drunk driver ran a red light. Only Oliver surviving long enough to reach the hospital, Emma had cried reading the articles. Remembering the exhausted man who had sat vigil by Oliver's bedside, the beautiful woman who had held her son's hand until the very end. She hadn't recognized them then, too focused on the children to notice the parents' faces fully. Now, standing in the lobby of Hayes Technologies Tower, she felt completely out of her depth. The building soared 60 stories above downtown Chicago, all glass and steel and impossible wealth. She wore her best interview outfit, a navy dress from a department store clearance rack, and held Sophie's hand so tightly the little girl squirmed. "Mama, you're squishing my fingers."
Sorry.
"Baby." Emma loosened her grip, but didn't let go. The receptionist had been expecting them. They were whisked to a private elevator that opened directly into a penthouse office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The view was breathtaking. It's a kind of panorama that reminded you how small you were in the grand scheme of things. Jackson stood by the windows, phone pressed to his ear, conducting business in that clipped, efficient tone of men accustomed to being obeyed. He wore another immaculate suit, this one navy blue, and looked every inch the corporate titan. When he saw them, his expression softened immediately. He ended the call mid-sentence, crossing the room in long strides. Sophie broke free from Emma's hand and ran to him, arms outstretched. Jackson caught her and lifted her high, eliciting delighted giggles. "There's my little friend. Did you bring me more songs today?" "I learned a new one. About butterflies and rainbows. I can't wait to hear it." Jackson settled Sophie on his hip with practiced ease, then turned to Emma. "Thank you for coming. I know this is unusual. It's unusual didn't begin to cover it." After their cafe encounter, Jackson had sent a card to Emma's apartment with a handwritten note. He wanted to discuss a business proposal he had written, something that could benefit them both. The formal tone hadn't quite masked the vulnerability underneath. "Your assistant said you had a job offer." Emma remained standing, too nervous to sit, despite Jackson's gesture toward the leather furniture. "Please, sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee, tea, water?" "I'm fine, thank you." They settled into an awkward arrangement, Sophie immediately climbing onto Jackson's desk to examine the various awards and photographs scattered across its surface. She picked up a framed picture of Oliver, studying it with the serious concentration only children possessed. "He looks like you," Sophie announced to Jackson. "Same eyes." Jackson's throat worked. "Yes, same eyes." Emma gently took the frame from Sophie's hands, but not before seeing the image. Oliver at maybe 4 years old, laughing on a beach, pure joy captured in a single moment. Her heart ached for this man's loss. "Mr. Hayes, I appreciate whatever you're offering, but I need to be honest. I can't accept charity. Sophie and I manage just fine." Jackson leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. "This isn't charity, Emma." "May I call you Emma?" She nodded. "I need an executive liaison. Someone who can handle sensitive communications. Interface with departments. Basically be my right hand for projects that require a human touch rather than corporate efficiency." He paused. "The previous person in this role left 6 months ago. I've interviewed dozens of candidates. No one fit. I manage a cafe. I have no corporate experience. You managed a volunteer program at a children's hospital. You balanced that with college classes and 2 part-time jobs, according to the background check I ran." I stiffened. "You investigated me?" "I investigate everyone who enters my professional sphere. It's not personal." Jackson's expression remained neutral. "You have a degree in social work you've never used. You're overqualified for your current position and underpaid. Your employee reviews are excellent. You're organized, empathetic, and reliable. And I have a 4-year-old daughter who comes with complications." "Sophie isn't a complication. She's part of the package." Jackson glanced at the little girl, who was now spinning in his desk chair, arms outstretched like an airplane. I want her here. I need her here. The raw honesty in his voice made Emma's defenses crack. Why? Because when I'm around her, I remember what it feels like to be human. These past 3 years, I've been a machine. I work, I sleep, I repeat. I've built an empire on autopilot while feeling absolutely nothing. He met Emma's eyes. Sophie makes me feel again. And you were there during Oliver's last days. You brought him comfort when I was too destroyed to function properly. Let me return that kindness. Emma stood abruptly, pacing to the windows. The city sprawled below, millions of people living their separate lives, none of them grappling with this impossible situation. This feels wrong. Using my daughter to heal your grief? Is it using if we both benefit? Jackson rose, joining her at the window, but keeping respectful distance. I'm offering you $150,000 a year, full benefits, flexible hours. You can bring Sophie every day. I'll set up a proper space for her with educational materials, whatever she needs. You'll have resources to give her opportunities you can't afford now. The number made Emma dizzy. That was more than triple her current salary. And when you get tired of playing family, when the novelty wears off and we're just reminders of what you lost, her voice cracked. I won't let Sophie get attached just to be abandoned again. Her father already did that. Flinched. I would never. I'm not capable of that. You don't know what you're capable of. Grief makes people unpredictable. Now let's make it official. A contract. 2-year minimum commitment. If I terminate the arrangement early for any reason other than gross misconduct, you receive the full 2-year salary as severance. Jackson's business mind engaged. Legal protection for both of us. Emma wanted to refuse. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was too good to be true, that accepting would only lead to heartbreak. But she looked at Sophie, spinning and laughing without a care, and thought about the opportunities this money could provide. Better schools, medical care, a safe neighborhood, college savings. I need time to think about it, of course. Take a week. Talk to a lawyer if you want. Have them review any contracts. Jackson returned to his desk, pulling out a business card and writing on the back. This is my personal cell. Call anytime, day or night, if you have questions. Their fingers brushed as Emma took the card. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, electric and unsettling. From Jackson's sharp inhale, he felt it too. Sophie chose that moment to announce she was hungry, breaking the tension. Jackson immediately offered to order lunch, and before Emma could protest. They were sitting in his private dining room while a chef prepared grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. You have a private chef? Emma couldn't hide her astonishment. The executive floor has amenities. I rarely use them. Jackson watched Sophie demolish her sandwich with enthusiasm. Tell me about her father. If that's not too personal. Emma's expression hardened. Derek was my college boyfriend. When I got pregnant, he accused me of trapping him. Told me to handle it and disappeared. Changed his number, moved to Seattle, blocked me on everything. He's never met Sophie, never wanted to. He sends child support because the court made him, but that's the extent of his involvement. Jackson's jaw tightened. He's missing everything. She's extraordinary. She is. Emma's voice softened with love. She's my whole world. I fell into easier conversation after that. Jackson talked about Oliver, sharing memories that had been locked away too long. Oliver's obsession with dinosaurs, his determination to be a paleontologist, the way he had faced his illness with courage that shamed the adults around him. Emma shared stories from the hospital. Careful not to overstep, but offering Jackson glimpses of his son's final weeks from her perspective. How Oliver had comforted other sick children, how he had made the nurses laugh even when he was in pain. How he had talked about his daddy being the strongest person in the world. He loved you so much, Emma said gently. Every story he told included you. His hero, Jackson's composure, finally crumbled. Silent tears tracked down his face, and he didn't bother hiding them. Sophie, with the intuition of innocent souls, climbed into his lap and wrapped her small arms around his neck. Don't be sad. Oliver is playing with angels now. They have the best toys in heaven. Jackson held her close. This child who was not his, but felt like a gift from the one he had lost. Emma watched them, her own eyes wet, and in that moment she knew her decision was already made. She would take the job. Not for the money, though that mattered. Not even for Sophie's opportunities, though those were crucial. She would accept because Jackson Hayes needed them as much as they needed him. And sometimes healing required trust, even when trust felt impossible. "Kay," she whispered. Jackson looked up, Sophie still in his arms. "Okay, I'll take the job. But I have conditions. Name them." Sophie's well-being comes first. Always. If at any point I feel this arrangement is harming her emotionally, we walk away and you honor the severance. Agreed. We maintain professional boundaries at the office. Whatever this is, this connection, we don't blur lines in front of employees. Jackson nodded slowly. Anything else? Emma hesitated, then pushed forward. You see a therapist? Regularly. I won't be your emotional crutch, or Sophie your replacement child. You need professional help to process your grief properly. For a long moment, Jackson simply looked at her. Then, slowly, he smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. You're hired. When can you start? I need to give 2 weeks' notice at the cafe. I'll compensate them for releasing you early. Start Monday. Just like that, Emma Rodriguez's life changed completely. She didn't know if she was making the best decision or the worst mistake. But as Sophie chattered happily about her new playroom, and Jackson listened with genuine interest, Emma felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope 6 months transformed everything. Emma had stopped questioning the impossibility of her new life and simply lived it. She woke each morning in a beautiful apartment Jackson had insisted the company provide. Rent-free, 3 blocks from his office tower. She dressed Sophie in clothes that actually fit, made breakfast in a kitchen with appliances that worked, and walked to work through safe. Clean streets. The executive liaison role had proven legitimate. Emma coordinated between departments, managed sensitive client communications, and became Jackson's bridge to the human element his company sometimes forgot. She was good at it, discovering skills she hadn't known she possessed. But the real transformation was in the relationships. Forming beneath the professional surface, Sophie had her own space on the executive floor. A bright room decorated with educational toys, art supplies, and a reading nook. A part-time nanny, Mrs. Chen, stayed with her during meetings. But Sophie spent most days drifting between her playroom and Jackson's office. Treating the billionaire CEO like her personal jungle gym, the office had adjusted to the unusual arrangement. Initially, there had been whispers and speculation. A single mother and her daughter living in company housing, the CEO who smiled now, who left meetings early to have tea parties, who kept children's drawings pinned to his office walls. But Jackson's work remained impeccable, profits soared, and gradually the gossip faded into acceptance. What didn't fade was the tension between Jackson and Emma. It simmered constantly beneath their professional interactions. The accidental hand touches that lingered too long. The way Jackson's eyes followed Emma across rooms. How Emma's breath caught when he stood too close. They maintained their boundaries religiously. But the boundaries were eroding. It was a crisp October evening when everything shifted. Jackson had invited them to dinner at his penthouse, a monthly ritual that had developed naturally. His home occupied the top 2 floors of a historic building overlooking Millennium Park. All exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows with the city lights glittering like fallen stars. Sophie was asleep in the guest room Jackson had furnished specifically for her, overnight stays. Emma sat on the balcony wrapped in a cashmere throw, watching the city breathe below. Jackson joined her with 2 glasses of wine, settling into the chair beside hers. She called me Daddy today. His voice was quiet, almost afraid. Emma's heart clenched. I know. I heard. I didn't correct her. I should have, but I couldn't. Jackson, we need to talk about what's happening here. Emma set down her wine glass. This has gone beyond professional, beyond friendship. I know. He turned to face her fully. I'm falling in love with you, Emma. I've been falling for months. And it terrifies me because I don't know if I'm betraying my wife's memory or if I'm finally allowing myself to live again. Emma's breath caught. Hearing the words spoken aloud made them real, undeniable. I feel it too. But I'm scared. Sophie is so attached to you. If this doesn't work, if we try and fail, she loses another father figure. Jackson reached across the space between their chairs, taking her hand. I told you once that I would never abandon her. I meant it. Even if you and I don't work romantically, Sophie will always have me in her life. I'll put it in writing if you need that security. It's not about contracts. It's about hearts. Emma squeezed his hand. Mine is already involved. So is hers. Yours too, I think. That's a lot of hearts to risk. Worth it, though, isn't it? Jackson's thumb traced circles on her palm. I've spent 3 years barely surviving. You and Sophie brought me back to life. I want to live again, Emma. Really live. With you, Emma stood, pulling Jackson up with her. They faced each other on the balcony with the city as their witness. If we do this, we do it right. Slow. We date properly. We make sure Sophie understands what's happening. We don't rush. Agreed. Jackson cupped her face in his hands. Though I should warn you, I'm notoriously impatient when I want something. Learn patience then. But Emma was smiling. Leaning into his touch, their first kiss was gentle. Tentative, both of them afraid to push too hard. Jackson tasted like wine and possibility. Emma felt tears slip down her cheeks, overwhelmed by the rightness of it. The way her broken pieces seemed to fit against his broken pieces and create something whole. When they finally pulled apart, both were trembling. I need to tell you something, Emma whispered. About Oliver's last night. Jackson stiffened slightly, but didn't pull away. Okay, your wife asked me to stay with him. You were both exhausted. Hadn't slept in days. She begged me to sit with him so you could both rest for a few hours. Emma's voice thickened with emotion. I held his hand all night. Sang every song I knew. He told me to take care of his daddy, that you would be so sad when he was gone. Jackson's composure shattered. He buried his face in Emma's shoulder, his whole body shaking with sobs he had held back too long. Emma held him, this powerful man brought low by grief and memory, and let him break apart in her arms. He made me promise, Emma continued through her own tears. Promise that someone would make you smile again. I told him I would try to find you an angel. I never imagined it would be me. They stood together as Jackson wept, releasing 3 years of bottled anguish. Emma stroked his hair and held him tight, giving him the space to finally and fully grieve. When the storm passed, Jackson lifted his head, eyes red but clearer than Emma had ever seen them. I'm not looking for you to replace her. I need you to know that. I know. I couldn't replace her even if I tried. Nor should I. Emma wiped his tears gently. But maybe we can build something new. Not a replacement, but a different kind of love. One that honors the past while embracing the future. I like that. Jackson managed a watery smile. Building something new. The next 3 months were a delicate dance. They dated properly, dinner dates when Sophie stayed with Mrs. Chen. Weekend outings as a family unit, slow, careful steps toward something permanent. Jackson was patient, courting Emma with thoughtfulness that took her breath away. Flowers delivered to her desk with notes that made her blush. Books he thought she would enjoy. Donations to causes she cared about made in her name. For her part, Emma introduced Jackson to a life beyond corporate walls. Community events, neighborhood festivals, the simple joy of cooking dinner together. She taught him that wealth was pleasant, but presence was priceless. Sophie bloomed under their combined attention. She started calling Jackson Daddy consistently, and he wore the title with pride. He attended her preschool events, learned to braid her hair through countless YouTube tutorials, became fluent in the language of 4-year-old girls, but not everyone was happy with the arrangement. Richard Morrison, Jackson's business partner and CFO, had watched the transformation with growing concern. He cornered Emma one afternoon outside Jackson's office, his expression carefully neutral, but eyes cold. Ms. Rodriguez, might I have a word? Emma gestured to her desk. Of course. What can I help you with? Richard closed the office door, a power move that made Emma's spine stiffen. I'll be direct. Your relationship with Jackson is affecting his judgment. He's turning down profitable opportunities because they require travel. He leaves early for school events. He's not the leader this company needs. His performance hasn't suffered. Quarterly earnings are up 17% because the systems he built still run. But he's coasting, distracted. Richard leaned against her desk. You seem like a nice woman. I'm sure you care about him. If you really cared, you'd recognize that you're holding him back. Emma stood, meeting Richard's eyes with steel in her own. Mr. Morrison, with respect, Jackson is more present now than he's been in years. His team actually sees him as human. Employee satisfaction scores are the highest they've ever been. He's not being held back. He's being healed by playing house with you and your daughter. Richard's mask slipped, revealing contempt. He's a brilliant man having a midlife crisis. Your convenient therapy. The words hit like physical blows, striking every insecurity Emma harbored. Before she could respond, Jackson's office door opened. He must have heard everything through the thin walls. Richard, my office. Now. The tone was pure ice. Richard's face paled. He followed Jackson inside, and through the closed door, Emma could hear the raised voices, though not the specific words. 5 minutes later, Richard emerged looking shaken. Jackson appeared in the doorway. Emma, please come in. Jackson was standing by his window, hands clasped behind his back, radiating tension. I'm sorry you heard that, he said without turning. Richard has been asked to resign. He'll be gone by end of week. Jackson, you can't fire your business partner because of me. I'm not. I'm removing someone who thinks he can speak to you that way. Jackson finally turned, and Emma saw the fury in his eyes. He's been undermining me for months, questioning every decision, spreading rumors that I'm unfit to lead. This was simply the final straw. Emma sank into a chair. He's not wrong, though. You have changed. You're less focused on work. I'm more focused on life. There's a difference. Jackson crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level. Before you, I was succeeding at business while failing at being human. Now I'm succeeding at both. That's not a problem. That's growth. But what if he's right? What if I am just convenient therapy? What if 6 months from now, you realize you don't actually love me, you just love how I make you feel? Jackson took her hands firmly. Emma Rodriguez, I love you. Not the idea of you, not what you represent, but you. Your terrible taste in movies, the way you hum while you work, how you defend everyone except yourself, your fierce protection of Sophie, your kindness that extends to everyone you meet. I love you. The words hung in the air between them. Emma felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling completely. I love you too, she whispered. I've been so afraid to say it. Jackson pulled her close, and they held each other while the city hummed beyond the windows. When they finally pulled apart, Jackson reached into his desk drawer. I was going to wait. Plan something elaborate and romantic. But life is too short and uncertain for waiting. He pulled out a small velvet box. Marry me, Emma. Be my wife. Let me be Sophie's father legally and completely. Build this new life with me. Emma stared at the box, her heart hammering. Inside was a stunning ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, unique and perfect. It was my grandmother's, Jackson explained. The only family heirloom I have. She told me to give it to a woman who made me believe in magic again. Jackson, this is so fast. We can have a long engagement. A year, 2 years, whatever you need. But I want the promise. I want to know we're building toward forever. Emma thought about Derek, who had run at the first sign of responsibility. About the years of struggling alone, convinced she would never find someone who wanted both her and her daughter. About Oliver's deathbed request that someone make his daddy smile. Yes. The word emerged strong and certain. Yes, I'll marry you. Jackson's face transformed with joy. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. They kissed, sealing the promise. And Emma felt pieces of herself she hadn't known were missing click into place. That evening, they told Sophie together. The little girl's reaction was pure, unbridled joy. She danced around the living room, chanting "Daddy's staying forever." With such happiness that both adults laughed through tears, the wedding happened 6 months. Later, in a small ceremony at the Chicago Botanic Garden, Emma wore a simple ivory dress that Jackson had insisted on buying, but she had chosen herself. Sophie was flower girl, scattering petals with dramatic flair. Mrs. Chen attended, beaming. A handful of close friends and trusted colleagues filled the seats. Jackson's vows reduced everyone to tears. He spoke of darkness and light, of lost love and found hope, of a little girl who had grabbed his tie and changed everything. Emma's vows honored the past while embracing the future, acknowledging the wife and son who had come before while promising to love Jackson completely as he was now, when they kissed as husband and wife. Sophie cheered loudest of all. The reception was held at Jackson's penthouse, intimate and perfect. As they danced their first dance, Emma looked around at this impossible life she had somehow stumbled into. "What are you thinking?" Jackson murmured against her hair. "That 6 months ago, I was invisible. Now I'm seen. You were always worth seeing. The world was just blind." Jackson pulled back to look at her. "I have something for you. A wedding gift." He led her to his study, where a framed photograph sat on the desk. It showed a young Emma in hospital scrubs, holding a small boy with a bright smile. Oliver. Someone had captured the moment without her knowing. "My wife took this," Jackson explained. "She showed it to me once, said you were Oliver's guardian angel. I found it in her things after the accident but couldn't look at it. It hurt too much. Now, I see it differently." "How do you see it now?" "As the moment my future wife entered my life for the first time. We just didn't know it yet." Jackson wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Oliver brought us together, Emma. First in that hospital, then through Sophie. He kept his promise to send me an angel." Emma leaned back into his embrace, watching through the window as Sophie danced with Mrs. Chen, as guests laughed and celebrated. "Do you think he knows? Wherever he is, I think he knows. And I think he's happy." Jackson kissed her temple. "I think they both are. My wife would have loved you. She would have wanted this for me, for us." They stood together in peaceful silence, honoring the past while fully embracing the present. Emma thought about the long journey from that cafe encounter to this moment. The fear, the trust, the slow building of something beautiful from broken pieces. "Mrs. Hayes," Jackson said softly, testing the name. Emma smiled. "I like the sound of that." "Good, because you're stuck with it forever." "Forever sounds perfect." They rejoined their wedding celebration. This patchwork family built from loss and hope and love that refused to be denied. Sophie ran to them, demanding another dance, and Jackson swept her up while pulling Emma close. They swayed together, all three of them. While the city lights sparkled beyond the windows like promises kept, Emma had spent years avoiding connection, hiding from pain, protecting herself and Sophie from further heartbreak. But Jackson Hayes had walked into that cafe and everything had changed. Not because he was wealthy or powerful, but because he was broken in the same place as she was broken. And somehow their fractures aligned perfectly. They had built something new from the ashes of their separate griefs. Not a replacement for what was lost, but an addition. A family that honored the past while creating its own future, and as Sophie's laughter filled the room. As Jackson held them both close, Emma understood the truth she had been searching for all along. Love didn't erase pain. It didn't replace what was lost. But it could coexist with grief, could grow in the spaces between sorrow, could prove that endings were sometimes just beginnings in disguise. She had avoided everyone, convinced isolation was safety. Until a billionaire walked in and a little girl grabbed his tie like she knew him. Like she recognized something the adults couldn't see. Like she understood that some connections transcend logic and reason. That some families are chosen by forces greater than chance. Emma Rodriguez Hayes stood in her new husband's arms, surrounded by love she had never imagined possible, and finally believed in magic again. The end.